What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto.
Welcome to episode 1338 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Pumpkins After Dark. Use promo code TOMIC15 and save 15% at pumpkinsafterdark.com. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast hosted by FOTML Grego and Redley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd is the Toronto Star's Ed Keenan.
Hey.
Boo, 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 boo. You need the horns here. Welcome back, Ed. Good to see you, man.
How you doing?
Good to see you. I'm doing well.
It is good to see you too, and good to be back here.
You have many children. That's how I open this episode.
Three. I have three.
I think that's many children.
Depends on the era. In today's world, it's. I don't. I've been on here so many times that I don't know if I've used my material before. But one observation was that when you have your first kid, everybody says, when are you going to get them a brother or sister? Like, they need a sibling. You can't have only one, right? And then when you have your second one, when you have your third one, though, everybody's like, what? 3? That's crazy. Why did you have 3? So 2 seems to be everybody's estimation of the perfect
2.5 is
number.
The average, right? I'm just like shocked you have material. Like, you're like a stand-up comic. You're working on bits and then you refine them and you keep them in your back pocket.
Well, it's less that and more just, there's the little anecdotes or things that because people will often say 3, that's a lot of kids. Now, my dad was one of 8. Jean Chrétien was the youngest of 14. It depends on.
Celine Dion.
It didn't used to be considered a lot.
No, of course not. But they didn't use birth control back in the day.
But that little observation about it is something I've said to people before, and it suddenly occurred to me, possibly I've said this on the show before. I think we had multiple times. I only realized after the fact that we had long discussions due to your sponsorship over the pronunciation of pasta, the Canadian American thing, which was we were mocked for in the U.S.
I just learned this today when I chatted with my new friend Randy Bachman. Bachman. It depended what country you were in. In the United States, it was Bachman. In Canada, it was Bachman. Did you know that, Ed Keenan?
As a Canadian, does he say Bachman?
Yes.
All right, there you go.
But he calls the band Bachman Turner Overdrive. So he literally said to me, I'm Randy Bachman from Bachman Turner Overdrive. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, my name is Edward Keenan. I'm the head of Canon Associates.
And that episode of Toronto Mic'd with Randy Bachman will drop in your feed as a Thanksgiving treat on Monday morning. So subscribe to Toronto Mic'd.
It's almost like I'm the opening act for Randy Bachman.
Jennifer Hollett isn't the meat
Turner
in that
Overdrive.
sandwich. Like
Well, and Jennifer Hollett. I don't mind being on that lineup. That's actually
pretty good, right?
Pretty cool, yeah.
Okay, I might work her into a question. A toro versus the walrus, 20 years on discussion here. But, okay, so why am I saying you have many children? Well, I actually have more children than you, Ed. There you go. But I was surprised. So I broke a lot of bones. Did you break bones as a kid or as a teen?
I broke my ankle when I was in my 20s, like late 20s, and that was the first broken bone I'd ever had.
And is that still your only?
I broke my nose a couple times, or had it broken a couple times in my 20s as well.
Like you got in a fight? Yes,
or people were punching me. Whether they would qualify as fights depends a lot on your interpretation.
I'm not even
of the word.
surprised somebody punched you, but that's just like
I just have a punchable face.
that's cartilage, like, so I don't think that
okay.
qualifies. But okay, so why am I talking? Because yesterday afternoon, the first child of mine to break a bone. That's a weird way to phrase it. But until yesterday afternoon, no child of mine had ever broken a bone.
Yeah.
And my youngest, my grade 2 7-year-old, Sweet Morgan, really broke. Like, she broke her arm in 2 places. So there was a bend in her arm between the wrist and the elbow.
Oh no.
Is
That's
that, like,
not
just-
something you want to
No,
see, especially not from one of your kids. You don't want to see it on anybody.
Okay, but so here's the thing. So they put her to sleep so they could like reset it, so they could, like, when the cast goes on.
How did this happen? How did she break it? Was she playing football or something?
I'm just picturing Morgan playing football, but she was like, not the monkey bars, but like the pull-up bars on the playground in her schoolyard. She was goofing around, and she's like a wannabe gymnast who does lots of crazy stunts, and one of the stunts must have gone very wrong, so she falls and it breaks her arm in 2 places. That's why it had that crazy bend in it. And then they put her to sleep to reset. So anyway, she's in a cast now for 6 weeks. But I was just like, oh yeah, that's the first time one of my kids broke a bone. Meanwhile, like, she's in grade 2. I broke my leg in grade 2, and I've been breaking bones ever since. I don't know if I'm just
so you're no stranger to the
No.
cast clinic at the hospital.
I
or
broke my
whatever.
wrist in March 2020, as recently as that. Like, I've had, I even like was like, shout out to Dr. Lopez. If you see him in the fracture clinic at St. Joe's, like, I know these people. So my daughter is now in that system.
I'm the only one of my children so far to break a bone, knock on wood, is my son who actually had just a hairline fracture in one of his fingers, but it was from getting hit by a pitch in a baseball game. In one of his very first baseball games where there was like pitching at all, player pitching.
Right.
He got hit in the hand. It broke his thumb, and so then he had a cast on. He was out for weeks.
Oh, they do a cast
when he
for a
came
thumb, eh?
back
Okay.
in his first at bat afterwards. He got hit by a pitch again. And there was some guest coach who came out and was just like, because he was starting to cry and stuff. He's 10 or 11 years old.
Right.
And the coach was like, it doesn't hurt. It's okay. You don't get hurt by playing hit by a pitch. And he was like, the last pitch I saw broke my thumb. Right. So
Did he stick with the sport? I feel like that's
he played another couple of years. It was never.
okay.
I mean, he likes playing baseball, but it was never one of his big things. He continued playing hockey too through his teenage years, but again, he wouldn't define himself as a hockey player. It was just something he enjoyed doing. So.
Well said, Ed Keenan. That's why you're here. You deliver the goods. Okay, so for those who are new to this experience, so we do this every quarter. For those who don't know, a quarter is every 3 months. Did you know that, Ed? So every 3 months is a quarter, and then every 3 months you waltz over here for your lasagna, which I know that's why
I
you're
got to
here.
keep it coming.
So there is a frozen lasagna in my freezer for you, Ed. Don't leave here without it. That is courtesy of Palma Pasta. I know I'm feeding your family, so this is important.
In Canada, shouldn't it be Palma pasta?
You know what? I'm going to ask my new friend Randy Backman how he says it. That's one of those words I've never got quite right. But regardless of how you say it, palmapasta.com, go there, support the sponsors. It's delicious, right? You guys enjoy that lasagna, right?
We do. It's very good. It's very good.
Okay. A lot of ground to cover. So I literally, I'm just going to prompt you.
Yeah, the news cycle has aided us as well. There's stuff to talk about.
Well, there's very timely stuff we're going to get to, but just a quick, we talked about baseball, and I'm here to tell you, Ed, I'm curious if you agree with me or what you thought, but I did not like the 2023 Blue Jays.
Oh, man. Yeah, I wrote about this week. I write about sports a couple times a year, right? I'm a city columnist at the Toronto Star, and I write sometimes about politics, sometimes about life in the city. And part of that is I write kind of from a fan's perspective about the Leafs or the Blue Jays or Toronto FC, often when something big is happening that gets the city swept up in it. And the kind of playoff preview column I wrote, was just like the theme of the column was my mood about this, which is that I so want to be hyped about it.
Yeah.
And I actually like a lot of the individual components and players of this team. I want to fall in love with them. Mm-hmm. And yet from beginning to end and right through the playoffs, it was just the most underwhelming, unexciting thing. There was every opportunity where a dramatic moment that would be seared in your memory would come just like kind of good pitching, some decent hitters, but they just couldn't put any runs on the board. Is like that, I'm not the first to observe, even like less than 24 hours of the game after the game, that Vladdy Guerrero getting picked off at second base with the best hitter on the team at the plate and runners on second and third and 2 out, and then an inning or two later, the bases loaded, sort of hit into a double play. That those two things kind of typified the season, right? That was, and I feel like I had no emotional investment in the team, despite being the kind of fan who desperately wants to have one.
So you and I feel exactly the same way. Do you remember, like in 1992, and the Jays might be down 2-0, but coming up in the ninth inning, let's say it was like, what is Whamco again? So White, Alomar, and
Carter's
Molitor. So you knew you had the
Henderson.
Those guys were coming up, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That was one Ham Cow or whatever we call it. Okay, but with Whamco, you knew
Winfield
wants noise. Okay, you knew the Jays were coming back. I don't know how to explain this sentiment, but they had fight in them. They came back late in games. They had what I call clutch hitting. I don't know if that really exists, but it felt like it existed for a younger Mike. And this particular Jays thing, when we were down 2-0 against Minnesota, both times actually, we might as well have been down 20-0. Like I told my wife, if we're mortgaging the home, I'm putting all my money on the Minnesota Twins to win this game.
You don't even have to go back to the like touch a ball Joe years.
Right.
It's like
2015.
You think about that 2015, 2016 team. You remember that sixth inning where with the bat flip and all of that.
I think it was the seventh.
That was a team. Or was it the seventh?
I'm here to fact check you. I think it was the seventh.
Either way, the drama of that was sort of like you knew at any moment they could just break the game back open. But never mind that. Last year they fizzled in the playoffs.
Yes.
But what a regular season. How much fun with the Barrio and the home run jacket, and like you never saw a group of players who looked like they were enjoying themselves so much.
Oscar Hernandez.
And that was a team that could like score like an NFL football team. Like any given inning they could put a touchdown on the board, right? It was going to be like, are they going to score 12 runs today? Are they going to score 14? Oh, look, they're down by 8, but don't count them out. It's only the bottom of the 8th, right?
Right. And Ed, you know, sports is the toy department here, and we have some real news to get to in a moment here. I know people are like, get to the real news. But I do want to say that what was it? Okay, what was I going to say about the Blue Jays? Was I going to crap on them again? I suppose I was. Where was I going with that?
Was this about the pitching change?
Yeah, that's what it was. Okay. So the idea that you'd go into a game deciding that this pitcher is going to pitch 4 innings and then we're going to switch it up to force them to get the right lefties in the lineup and whatever, like to have this kind of this analytics strategy and then have the actual game show you that Barrios is pitching a gem and he's really dealing, and he's four innings in, he's dealing, and to see him pull for Kikuchi, okay. This is to me the epitome of like, and I'm not trying to be I'm not an anti-analytics guy, okay? I live in the real world. They use analytics and you try out for like a High Park Select baseball, okay? Like it's everywhere and it's important. But you can't let the algorithm determine everything. Like, I don't know how you feel, but I'm at a point now where like this is still for the fans, right? Let him pitch. It's 4 innings. I don't know how many pitches he threw, but not that many. And he was pitching a gem and let's go. All year, he has gone deep in games. That's why they pay him the big money. Right?
They set up a whole pitching rotation based on guys who could go deep, who could take you through to the 6th inning.
Right.
And when he's pitching a shutout, but also like looking good, like never in trouble. I have a hard time understanding that, and it does seem like the kind of thing where you're outsmarting yourself. I've seen this at like I coach and parent like youth baseball, and there are like strict pitch counts for youth baseball pitchers. And if you take a pitcher out of a game after a certain number of pitches, they can pitch again tomorrow. And at so many tournaments, I've seen like an ace pitcher in an elimination game, right? Get you through 3 innings. You're shutting out, you're up by 2, and the coach says, oh, we got to take that pitcher out so that they're available tomorrow. Right. But guess what? There's no tomorrow when you lose. And that's what happened to the Blue Jays here. They're like, because even your best pitchers, you just don't know how they're going to be throwing today, right? Like, it's like one of those things where, and we've all seen this, like our favorite guys, is like Jordan Romano comes out and shuts them down, or sometimes he gives up a couple home runs. It's like, does he have his best stuff? It's hard to tell from the bullpen.
Right.
And I feel like that with Kikuchi. You got a pitcher in there who is just like on top of his game, dominating the lineup. I know these guys have charts that show them like, oh, the third time through,
third time for sure,
used to them and all of that. But that early in the game, it just I don't understand it.
Right.
Like, but
it's no country for old men.
he looks like a hero if it works, right? Like if Kikuchi comes in and pitches like 4 or 5 innings of like no hit baseball, they get to their closers, they put a couple runs on the board, they actually win. Then Schneider and the front office look like analytics superstars for making the call nobody would make. But when you make the call nobody would make, and it turns out in retrospect to have been the wrong one, then it's the opposite of looking like a hero.
And that concludes Jays talk with Edward Keenan. Move over, Mike Wilner.
I'm so happy to talk about the Jays because as much as I get to write once or twice about sports a year, from a fan's perspective, like nobody we have people to talk about those game decisions at the Star. So it's not I don't get to do it in the paper. So I'm happy to do it here.
Okay, anytime, buddy, anytime. Now, Toronto's Integrity Commissioner released a report today, right?
Here we go.
Okay, so have you read this report?
I have, and I have already filed a column about it.
Wow. Okay, so what time today was that released?
So this is the report into the conduct of Mayor John Tory that led him to resign from office, and it was released this morning. I'm not sure exactly what time it was released. I became aware of it around 9:30 or 10 a.m., read it immediately, So what do you want to know about?
Well, I want to know everything.
So people out there listening can, likely tomorrow morning it will be published because there's a news story up now, so they might hold my column, but they can go to thestar.com tomorrow and read it, especially if they're subscribers, they can access it.
I'll read, well, yes, you should be a subscriber, everybody. So I'll read the headline, and then you've read this report, and you've written about it for the Toronto Star. People are going to subscribe right away and read what you wrote there. But former Toronto Mayor John Tory violated the city's code of conduct by engaging in a personal relationship with a staffer and then taking part in council votes on the FIFA World Cup after that staffer left City Hall to work for a company helping to organize the event. It's more than a headline. Toronto's Integrity That's a long headline.
I was going to say that.
Okay, it's not a headline, everybody. Headline. I don't know where I pulled it from even. I'm terrible. But please help us understand this, because what we knew, of course, was that John Tory had an inappropriate relationship with a City Hall staffer. You and I talked in great detail about that.
Yeah, and now here's the thing, is that actually the headline, the Integrity Commissioner did find that he violated the code of conduct in 2 ways, and exonerated him from having violated it in a variety of other ways. The 2 ways he was found to have violated it are maybe the 2 most innocuous of the available, like I wouldn't call them charges, but like available accusations. So he investigated whether there was any sexual harassment involved or anything like that. No, right? This was a welcomed and reciprocated relationship on both ends. It was respectfully conducted by all accounts. She wasn't shown any favoritism in the workplace. They didn't improperly use any, like she didn't go on any trips with him while this relationship was going on, because actually it was during the pandemic. So there was no trip. There were no trips being taken, like during the shutdown phase of the pandemic. He was shown or found by the Integrity Commissioner not to have used his influence to get her a job outside the office. He was found not to have put any kind of pressure on her to leave. So the gist of what he was found to have done wrong in that respect, in respect to actually having the relationship, is the kind of thing that when you're conducting, not to steal thunder from my column that's being published tomorrow, but it's kind of the lead, is that these rules that govern interpersonal relationships at City Hall were not really written with a clandestine extramarital affair in mind, because what John Tory was found to not to have done wrong was like not tell the integrity commissioner about the affair as soon as it started and seek his advice on how to conduct it, and then also not going to his chief of staff in the mayor's office and spreading the word, hey, I'm cheating on my wife with this junior employee. Can you make sure that doesn't disrupt things here at all? And he also didn't adequately document the steps he would like every step of their relationship to show that that they were separating the business and the personal and all of that. And it just seems like all three of those things like are contrary to the whole apparent concept of like a secret extramarital affair. Right. If you can't tell your closest friends because it might blow up your whole life and marriage, you're probably not going to go and start chatting about it with the other office staff to say, hey guys, how can we make sure that this is on the up and up? I mean, which might be why it's ill-advised to engage in such a relationship in the first place. If
you know what Tony Soprano
right?
says, right?
So then the other thing is the conflict of interest, right? So here's the thing.
Yeah, I'm more interested in this almost. Let me hear your thoughts on this.
The junior staffer went on and got a job first at a hospital that was affiliated in its campaigns with MLSE and fundraising and whatnot, and then directly for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Working on their World Cup bid, but not just bid, but like hosting, helping Toronto host of it, right?
Right.
So John Tory was found that she's working directly for one of the main organizers and lobbyists of that campaign, that bid. And at the time when the city and MLSE are trying to negotiate, like, what the contract's going to look like for MSLE's involvement, right? And there's a vote at City Council about an update on that work, and then another vote to authorize city staff to give MLSE that contract and negotiate the details of it. And John Tory voted on both of those. And the Integrity Commissioner found that given the fact that she was a part-time employee whose full-time employment would be contingent on sort of like them succeeding in this bid, them actually getting the job. And he was had a very special relationship with her, ongoing, off and on, but still off and on at that time, after she left his office, that he should have declared a conflict of interest because the way it could have benefited her. Sure.
Yeah, but it was a secret affair, so...
Yeah, and not only that, but John Tory was, at the time, being paid $100,000 a year to sit on the trust that oversees the parent company, one of the parent companies of MLSE. That direct financial interest in the outcome of the vote seems to me to be a far more direct and glaring conflict of interest that somehow is not even mentioned here.
Interesting.
Like that
has always fascinated me, right? We talked about this in the past that he was making $100,000 a year from the Rogers Trust. I don't know the full name like you do, but I call it the Rogers Trust. Meanwhile, MLSE is 37.5% owned by Rogers. Like the conflict is obvious.
Yeah, you work for the company that is dealing with the city. You're in a conflict of interest, and John Tory did frequently declare conflicts of interest. He had a full. I was going to say full-time, but like an ongoing relationship with the Integrity Commissioner to advise him on his potential corporate conflicts of interest and whatnot. And so he absented himself from all kinds of votes that involved Rogers and telecommunications in general because of that. And somehow, I don't know if it's because it's a minority, only a 37.5% equal sort of not a majority stake. I don't know why MLSE was not considered a conflict for him, but his conflict is that he helps run the parent company of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that company stands to benefit if Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment financially benefits, right? I
100%. And you make it sound like it's I don't know, 0.375% or something. But
no, it's a third, more than a third.
Well, it's right. It's like a third of, you know what it is? It's half of 3/4. I think that's right. Right. So 37.5. It's a huge chunk, Ed. And this is always
there are no bigger shareholders than that.
No.
Bell owns an
Bell
equal
and Rogers
stake.
are the biggest ones. Yeah, of course. That's right. So why is that? Do you have any idea why the integrity commissioner is more focused on the fact that this intimate relationship is working there?
I don't know. And so, you know, as these kind of conflict of interest votes go, the weird thing about the Conflict of Interest Act, John Tory has already fired himself. Like we're getting the judgment now, but he's already administered the punishment. And a lot of people reading this will think, a lot of people at the time thought that punishment was too harsh. A lot of people are going to have that conclusion reinforced. As conflict of interest go, if somebody were to bring a conflict of interest complaint, as we know from the Rob Ford years, the only punishment is like removal from office. Like there's no major and minor in the eyes of the law at this. If there's a private complaint brought about a conflict of interest and it goes to an actual legal courtroom, not the integrity commissioner. But that said, there are conflicts of interest where you are essentially self-dealing, right? You're funneling money to yourself or to your family members or your friends. You are awarding a contract to your own company or to your wife's company. You're selling land to yourself. Like, these are what many of us would be considered like major conflicts of interest. The fact that your ex-girlfriend or your like maybe, you know, off and on paramour,
your special friend,
works part-time for one of the companies involved seems like small potatoes in the size of this scope of this, the whole project, right? And it seems weird. It unlikely that would be a major consideration of John Tory's in how he'd vote on this thing. However, like the overriding thing, and I think this is where John Tory resigned because he wants to be the kind of guy who is seen to believe in these rules. And I think on some level he genuinely does believe in the value of this stuff. Like he believes it's his job as mayor to be Mr. Clean, and when he wasn't, he wants to own up to that, accept responsibility for it, and maybe slink off stage so that he doesn't have to be subject to ridicule. But I think in both the improper relationship and this improper vote, like your job is to be above suspicion. There's like language in the preamble of the code of conduct that is quoted in the integrity commissioner's report, and I don't have the language in front of me, but it's something to the extent that like you should arrange your public and private affairs in a way that withstands close scrutiny and inspires the confidence of the public, right? So anything you would rather keep secret is by definition something that you don't want to withstand close scrutiny, right? Like it's like these are both significant errors of judgment. However, I don't know that given he's the former mayor, there's a lot for us to rake over the coals. And now what some people out there want to know is if there are any scandalous, juicy details of the affair and all of that. There are some details. I would say they're not particularly juicy, and that's maybe a lot of us feel like those details are none of our business. I will say, though, that like as illicit extramarital affairs go, this seems to have been a relatively tame one. There's no paper trail of texts or sex or anything like that. The integrity commissioner notes that according to all involved, there was extremely limited physical contact between the two over the extent of the relationship, that it was primarily a relationship in which they were beloved companions. They spent a lot of time watching sports on TV, sharing meals together, having long conversations about like the boundaries of the relationship and the future that they both wanted, and they both knew there was no future in this relationship because she wanted to start a family and he wasn't at a stage in his life where that was something he could give her, and so he was encouraging her to continue dating. And when she eventually started seriously dating some other person, that's when their relationship broke off. It's like really as it's as unsleazy as something as inherently sleazy as this could be, from the details we are hearing here. Anyhow.
Well, I haven't read this report as you have, and I'm processing in real time, and they're this close to having a friendship, Ed, and this is how...
Yeah, no, I mean, and that seems like what... I mean, the way it's described, and obviously not obviously both of them, but in this case, both of them have an interest maybe, given that there's no aggrieved party here. There's not either of them who feels embittered by this relationship. I think the aggrieved parties, to the extent that there is one, is John Tory's estranged wife, Barb Hackett. So they maybe have an interest in portraying the relationship a certain way or downplaying anything that would cause suspicion. So this is based on interviews with them and the evidence available to the commissioner. But that said, like, what they're describing is basically that working closely together during those pandemic years when she was here in a city where she's not a native. Her family's all in a different city, in a different part of Ontario. She's all alone. His wife is living in Florida. His family's living away. He's all alone. They work closely together on a lot of things, and they begin to rely on each other for emotional support. And then eventually that bleeds over into a special friendship, which at some point has a romantic element that is enough there to cause everybody concern and all of that, but it doesn't seem like it was a sorted, like, hitting the motels at lunchtime or anything like that. It was not an Adam Jambroni type of situation where there's like a map of locations in City Hall where they have romped together or anything like that. This is
right,
much more like the character of John Tory we thought we knew before we learned about this.
Well, I still think back to those 4 words strung together, John Tory sex scandal. Like, is it all a dream? I can't even, was that true? Like, John Tory sex scandal? I did not see that coming in 2023.
I will say that, so there's a timeline here, and people can go read this on the city's website if they want, or read about it in the Toronto Star or other outlets, obviously. But, so the timeline of this relationship is that they're working together. They begin having this relationship. His wife, Barb Hackett, finds out about it. They have what appears, at least in the cold prose of the integrity commissioner, to sort of come to an understanding about it, where he's going to break it off. He runs the breakup text, the breakup email past Ms. Hackett. And also and sort of like agrees to certain things, right? That they're going to continue working together. They both agree it would be unfair for her to like have to leave his employ. Like, that would be unfair to her because of, something John Tory did, all of that. So, she didn't do anything wrong. But he has to break it off, right? So he does, by both accounts, but then this relationship is rekindled at some point later. And so then when his wife discovers that, again, she discovers it. I don't recall. I may have glossed over them, or the details of how she discovered it might be not be there. But it's not the sense where like he came and volunteered it necessarily that I was left with. But she rediscovers it and confronts him again, and basically they together retain Amanda Galbraith of Navigator, who used to be his communications director. Like, she worked for him in his first term as an elected official, as an advisor to the two of them. And then also at Barb's insistence, he tells his chief of staff. Now, this is why I'll wind up. And so that he can be sure that she's being treated fairly, they want to limit the physical, like the time when they're in the same room together and all of that. Like, she decides at that point, independently, that she'd like to seek employment elsewhere and begins looking for that. But so it's sort of like they had even thought of issuing some kind of joint statement or talking to some other people, including the integrity commissioner, but he didn't want it to become a story. But he did tell Luke Robertson, his chief of staff, but Robertson came away from that meeting under the impression that it was not a physical relationship at all, that there was no sex involved. And when this story first broke, I was being very careful how I wrote about it. I still I'm not privy to any of those details, and I don't even really want to be. But it's not clear to me if this is a sex scandal. Like, if the physical conduct they had does involve what you and I would call sex. You would think so. I mean, because that's most people's definition of cheating. But it seems like the depiction of the relationship in the report, and also from the way John Tory talked about it, and the way John Tory's staff behind the scenes were reacting to us, on background and whatnot as it was coming out, was that a lot of them were under the impression that this is basically like an emotional relationship that was inappropriate for a married man and maybe inappropriate for two people who work together so closely, but that like some mayoral staffers were saying outright to reporters, like, my understanding is there was no sex. And maybe it's none of my business if there was or not, but it does make it all the weirder as sex scandals go.
Yeah, one of the more bizarre sex scandals in politics. And again, I'm processing it in real time, and I joked earlier that they were this close to this being a very close friendship. Inappropriate regardless, especially because he wields all the power. Like, we got to remember the power imbalance here. He's the mayor of Toronto, and he wields all the power. So this is an inappropriate relationship, which he himself has called it. But maybe not the sex scandal we were led to believe.
Yeah, I mean, or that people jump to the conclusion it must be. I mean, this is one of the things where, in assessing this, if I had never heard of this before, I would read it and think, okay, this is shocking stuff about John Tory. There's going to be repercussions of that, right? But because the first whiff of this we all got was that somebody, from the Star who'd been looking into it contacted him to say, hey, did this relationship exist or not? Like, there was a point in late 2022, so 3 or 4 months before this came out, but where they were essentially out of the closet socially, right? He went and visited her family in her hometown. They were seen out and about together at parties, eating together in the distillery district. They seemed, to whatever extent their relationship was a romantic one, they seemed to be no longer hiding it. And then they broke up shortly after that because she had found somebody, closer to her own age,
she wanted
and
a
her
family,
own life
like
stage,
said,
and all of that.
Sure.
And then it came out, but the first question, hey, did this relationship exist? We're just looking into it. He came and said he had held a press conference and resigned like an hour later, right?
Right.
So a lot of people's minds jump to the conclusion there must be a lot more to this thing. Like, there must be dirty laundry in that basket that he doesn't want anybody looking at, right?
Sure.
If there is, it's not revealed in this report. If there's something more to it, it's not there. This report, our minds would have concocted something much more elaborately troublesome than what's in this report, which is not to say that, like, this is good conduct or whatever. That's the thing, is that trying to evaluate it, it's like this likely would have been worthy of a lot of attention and debate at city council and all of that if he had tried to ride it out, or if we'd never heard about it, it was just coming to light. As it is, I think a lot of people would have assumed that it was worse than it was.
I think you're absolutely right on that. And again, the integrity commissioner did find that John Tory violated the city's code of conduct. So, I mean, on a couple of fronts. So the relationship itself was a violation, which tells you maybe they were more than just beer buddies or whatever, having a Great Lakes. But the FIFA World Cup, he didn't recuse himself. And again, you and I can talk about how there was a more glaring conflict just right there. But the two wrongs probably don't make a right, despite what some people think. So Yeah, interesting. And I look forward to reading the full piece in the Toronto Star. And Ed, you're always good at making these complex things simple for us normies. So that seems to be your superpower.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. It's
and I'm the most normie of the normies. So.
I got a very normie brain, so that's how it works.
Well, that's your secret. By the way, I think you might enjoy this, but it depends how we take it. But on the live stream, I see from Lisbon, Portugal, is longtime listener Ian Service, who's watching you live on the live stream, which is live.torontomike.com. And his comment is, wow, Ed looks nothing like how I imagined him. That's the comment. So I immediately, I guess you could take it two ways, but I always think when I hear a voice on the radio, this is especially true back in the day, like I'm going to pick on somebody like a John Tory, but you hear a big voice. And then at some point you actually see them in real life. And forever you've been envisioning them as basically looking like Don Draper. Okay,
yeah.
This is, you know what I mean? Or a Christopher Reeve in Superman or something. And then you meet them and they're like, they're just a guy or whatever. So maybe Ian, if you hear us, you can elaborate because I'm dying to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been told that before, but I've probably said it to a lot of people before too. Like,
but you're a good-looking guy.
Although I try not to say like you look nothing like I thought you would look like, because it can come across like, oh, I thought you were a handsome man, and it turns out
that's how I interpret it. I thought you looked like Don Draper.
Turns out you're more the Clark Kent than the Superman. But
no, he was good-looking too.
But I mean, I don't know what the guy who sounds like my voice or who looks like my voice looks like. The weird thing is that I get a lot of compliments on my radio voice or whatever.
Well, that's why you're on the radio.
And so I've come to...
Are you still on the radio?
We'll come back to
that. Okay.
I've come to like think that, but I grew up and spent a lot of time thinking I talk like Kermit the Frog. I think like I have a denasalized kind of thing, and especially when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, I thought, oh, I've got this kind of weak, reedy voice.
Welcome to the club.
And then, oh no, it actually is. It works okay for broadcast.
It works okay.
Yeah.
I had I never got on the radio, unlike you. But forever, I wouldn't dare talk into a microphone because I don't sound like John Tory. I don't sound like Tom Rivers. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, this high pitched, squeaky thing. But it turns out people seem to dig the authentic voice that you have. Anyways, Ed, you have a great voice. Well, just take care of this right now, which is that Amanda Cupido, who's an FOTM, much like yourself, friend of Toronto Mike, I root for her, but she was sadly removed of her duties at AM 640, and they brought in a guy who was running the show at 1010, as you know, Mike Ben Dixon.
Yeah.
And then I actually literally, so just today, I got a PR email from Chorus, and they're like, we're adding Anna Bailão. Sorry, I was working on this when she came over. Bailão. Like there's almost an N at the end of that thing. Okay?
Right.
So Anna Bailão, this is irrelevant, but that's how you say her name. Steve Paikin and Ben Mulrooney, all people I'm very friendly with, particularly Steve Paikin and Ben Mulrooney, are now new voices you'll hear on 640. I'm curious if Ed Keenan's voice is still a voice we'll hear on 640 in the new Mike Ben Dixon era.
I imagine it will be in some capacity or another, or like as a guest, if nothing else. But I don't know. I gotta have a coffee with Mike Ben Dixon at some point. I mean, I had been filling in for Alex Pearson on a fairly regular basis, as well as occasionally filling in other places or chipping in other places.
If Paikin's eating your lunch here, I can talk to him. I can rough him up a little bit.
No. I mean, the thing is that either way, there's not going to be any hard feelings on my front. Like I had like a shift or two scheduled there that when Mike got the job, he texted me to say, I didn't realize this. I already booked somebody else for those spots. Let's have coffee soon. And we haven't had that coffee soon. I've been busy, all of that.
Right.
But I haven't been booked for anything else. So I don't know if he's changing directions or whatever. But I think it's like he's free to do that. Sure. And I actually am really busy right now. Like I'm doing a couple podcasts a week at the Toronto Star under the This Matters banner right now. And, like we're going to continue to work out that podcasting strategy, which scratches that broadcasting itch I have. I mean, my primary...
And you still have your quarterly appearances on Toronto Mike?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I lack for opportunities to talk, right? So I I hope I'll still be part of the picture in some way at 640. But we'll see. I do. Jason Chapman, who was kind of my radio broadcasting fairy godmother in some ways, like he was one of the people who really pushed to bring me on at 1010 when I first started doing guest appearances there and then joined panels and then had my own Sunday night show. He was a real champion of me there. When he went over to 640, and I had, we talked about this on one of my first appearances, I had sort of like trailed off at 1010, partly because Sunday nights no longer worked for me with my kids and everything, right. And it was like there wasn't another slot, so it was just sort of like, but Jason called me and said, hey, are you interested in doing more guest hosting and stuff with us? And so I went over to 640 with him, and so he's now left and gone to the Board of Trade.
Right.
And shortly after that, like within a week, I think, or two, Amanda also left. And so they were two people who were when I came back from the U.S., were really keen on, and they were my kind of fan club at the station. I have great relationships with almost everybody else I've worked with there, but, I just don't know. So
Keenan. That could be like your byline.
That was the name of the column I wrote for my high school newspaper.
Oh, really? Because I thought I just invented it. I'm very, very proud of myself.
I didn't come up with it. There was one of the editors there who was like, "You're gonna write a humor column? Let's call it Keenan."
I like it. Okay, very good. Now I have some provincial stuff I want to ask you about, but I actually don't want to leave the city stuff quite yet. But we mentioned Paikin. I guess I mentioned it because Paikin has some time on his hands right now, and he's going to fill in for Kelly Catrera on AM 640. Much like yourself, Edward Keenan, Steve Paikin is a dear FOTM, so he's right with you on the Mount Rushmore there. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts, if any, on the fact that TVO, I can't remember the name of the union right now, you'll remind me, but there's a strike at TVO, which is affecting Paikin.
That might
never end.
Free up his time for this.
But it's been a while.
Hustle.
It's been, I don't know, almost a couple of months or something, and there's no end in sight. And I told Steve when he came over with John Michael McGrath that I wouldn't be, if I were Doug Ford and his party, I wouldn't be in a huge rush to settle this, because TVO are much like you at the Toronto Star. These are media bulldogs that are actually interested in these scandals, Greenbelt and Ontario Place, etc. And one less voice kind of, telling the public that things are stinky here might benefit a premier like Doug Ford. So what are your thoughts on the strike? Will it ever end? I don't have high hopes about this. Any thoughts on this?
The thoughts I have are that I hope there's an end to it in sight soon. I hope that the editorial staff there and the other staff are adequately compensated, right? I think
CMG, just so I don't forget, it's TVO CMG that is on strike. Okay.
Right. So, the thing is that the media business in the private sector is been having a tough go of it, revenue-wise, right? Mm-hmm. The people like TVO and CBC are insulated from that, right? TVO more so because they don't even sell advertising, right? These are civil servants who get paid on a civil servant pay scale, and it does seem to me like they are professionals who do a very good job, who manage the delicate balance between like covering the province's issues while depending on the provincial government for their funding.
Sure.
Very, very handily. And like I have nothing but respect for them, and I think they deserve to come out of this well. Like I think but you're right that maybe this conservative government in particular, but conservative governments in general, Pierre Poilievre is making a lot of hay right now about the prospect of defunding the CBC and all of that. Like among the conservative base, the idea of like punishing the pinko liberals who are perverting the news through our public broadcasters resonates, right? Like this is your tax dollars being spent to spread this propaganda. So like maybe it doesn't hurt him among those supporters, but I think there's a moral obligation as an employer to treat these staff properly.
remember this little factoid.
Doug Ford is well known to listen to my moral instructions. So,
and Doug Ford is the first premier since TVO was it Bill Davis? Who the heck? Whatever premier? No, Robards. Anyway, I'm going to run down all the premiers we've had, but since TVO became, there's only been one premier that has not talked to TVO, and that is Doug Ford. Doug Ford has never been on the agenda or had any conversations with TVO since he was elected premier. So, I mean, that's a little clue that maybe Doug Ford isn't the greatest TVO fan.
That, it does surprise me, though, right? Just because you'd think, I haven't known Doug Ford to like run away from opportunities to talk to the public. He has granted interviews to the Toronto Star at various points. He certainly at 640 has phoned me directly to talk on the air sometimes while I've been hosting there, at least once or twice. Like, it would just seem like you'd want to reach those viewers, right?
It was Bill Davis. I want to get my facts right. It takes me a little longer sometimes, but Bill Davis announced the introduction of TVO in 1965. So Doug Ford, I agree with you. You think he would. But, there's been many requests by the people at the Agenda and at TVO to talk to Doug Ford over the past how many years now, and he has declined.
Of all the media figures that you could think really stick it to Doug Ford or really give him a hard time, I wouldn't have put Steve Paikin at the top of that list.
He'd be not nowhere near the top of that list. I believe some family members are very close with the... we could do another hour on the Steve Paikin conflicts of interest, actually, if you have time. I joke about, he's got many declarations to make on all topics, including the Greenbelt. But yeah, I'm with you. And he's I'm a big fan of Steve Paikin, just like I'm a fan of yours. I think he's straight up the middle, and he would have been great. But anyway, TVO strike, ongoing. We wish these guys well. Paikin did tell me he's not taking any strike pay, so he's making sure the strike pay goes to those who weren't making. He's on the sunshine list, as you know, so anyone can.
So anybody can look it up, but it's it's in the mid six figures.
Yes, that's right. Almost exactly. Okay, so we talked about the former mayor John Tory. How is the new mayor Olivia Chow doing so far? It's early, but how is she doing so far?
You know what? I think she's getting her office set up and running, and so far so good, right? A lot of the big things she wants to do, we're gonna know, say in another year, how much real progress she's made. But a lot of the signs of progress are there, including, getting Doug Ford to, he's not only do they not have a hostile relationship, they have a apparently warm and friendly relationship, at least publicly, and reportedly privately too. But not only that, it's like she went into Queen's Park to ask him to join her for a new deal for Toronto, and she didn't come out with a signed check or anything, right? There was actually a small check announced right before that for further help with refugee settlement and all of that. But she went into that meeting to ask for help. And Doug Ford, who has built a career on saying that Toronto City Hall is like the gravy train, that the NDP pinkos there have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, that taxes need to be cut and more efficiencies need to be found, came out and said Toronto has a revenue problem. It needs a new deal. We, the provincial government, have to be part of the solution, and we're going to put on a task force together to make that happen. That existence of that task force doesn't mean Doug Ford's caved to her, but he was reading her talking points coming out of that, and it was a 180 reversal from everything he's ever said about Toronto City Hall before, and I feel like that in itself is a small achievement. And then she's gone to Ottawa, and she was getting encouraging noises now, finally, from some members of the federal government about, how they can work together to solve problems. She's got some of her housing initiatives up off the ground, but they're still at the stage where they're going to need more approvals and whatnot. And so as the first steps here in the first few months to laying the groundwork for success, the signs point to yes. But like, it will be a while before we start seeing it in concrete ways that are going to actually like measure on the scoreboard ultimately, I think.
And am I correct that you can now get data on your mobile device in the subway system?
I had that happen to me the other day. I got a text from my service provider,
So did I.
who is not Rogers,
Right, same here.
telling me that I would now be able to use data in parts of the subway system, right? Like the U downtown,
Right.
as well as almost every stop, I think, every station itself. Like, but there's not infrastructure in all of the tunnels along the Bloor Danforth line and all of that, right?
But still, this is quite the
But
the
it's
progress.
a revolution, and I was using it the other day. It took me a moment to realize, because I often would sort of like pull out my phone and read something I already had open,
right.
and then I will realize I have no signal again when I mindlessly click on something and I realize, oh, it's not loading. And in this time, something loaded, and I was like, oh, it's on. It's on. And it's like 10 years overdue, and yet it's still something to celebrate.
So we got that. I will tell you, what was it called again when the Toronto Star had that PDF that was available at like 4 p.m. every day? What was it called? Do you remember? So I was working at like Avenue Road in Bloor or something, and I had a subway ride west afterwards. And I would print it at the office, like
Was
literally.
it TO Tonight? No, it wasn't.
No,
That
it
was
wasn't a
something
Tonight
else. Yeah.
thing. Oh, I'll figure it. I wrote about it on torontomike.com at some point. But I remember I would get my PDF before I would leave the office. I would print it, and then I would read this Toronto Star PDF on the subway. And to think, I've been, ever since then, basically, I just bike everywhere, so I don't have to worry about this. But to think, I could just read it on my mobile. I could just download and read on my mobile phone today. This is exciting, exciting time. So thank you to whoever made that happen. Amazing.
And yeah.
Star Touch? No, that's the
Star
app.
Touch was
That
the
app.
iPad app. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, next time you're in one of your wonderful detailed answers, I will dig into my own blog. See how I said that?
Wonderfully detailed is the
Well, here, let me set you up for one more.
way
here.
to say rambling. It's a very polite way. I'm going to save that.
I'm keen on Keenan. Remember that. I'm going to get a T-shirt. Keen on Keenan. What the fuck is up with the Eglinton Crosstown LRT?
Man, my understanding is that the head of Metrolinx knows what the fuck is up with it, but will not tell us. That's basically what he said at his most recent press conference. Anybody just catching up, if you're listening in Spain or something and you're not following the ins and outs of Toronto
Lisbon,
transit
Portugal,
woes,
like Ian. Okay,
yeah.
here we go.
This is a massive, mostly underground, rapid transit line that runs across the city from the West End to Scarborough. It will be extended eventually in both directions, further out into Scarborough, further out into Etobicoke. But the first phase of it, which is already one of the biggest lines we'll have, has been under construction for 12 years now,
Which is
more or
crazy.
less, and was supposed to open in 2020, and then early on, I think actually, like fairly well before 2020, we knew it's not going to open in 2020. It's going to be 2021 instead. Then, as 2021 approached, they were like, no, 2022. Like, it will be in service in 2022. And then in the fall of 2022, they kind of said, nope, that's not going to happen either, and we don't have a new date yet. We will let you know early next year when the new date is. And early next year came and went, and turned out like Metrolinx, the agency responsible for building this, and the contractors they hired to build it started threatening to sue each other and everything. And there was silence, like radio silence, apparently, reportedly imposed on them by the provincial government, like political staffers, saying like, do not communicate with these members of the public or the press. We just shut it, right? And so that was the strategy, was like, no news is good news. And guess what? We did not out here interpret it as good news, that they were not communicating. And so then the head of Metrolinx said, by the end of the summer, I will give you an update, right? Like, just leave me alone. By the end of the summer, I'll be able to give you a date. I'll be able to tell you when this thing's going to open. And so the end of the summer came, and some of us took note of the fact that, like, actually the equinox is upon us, and no press conference has been scheduled. And so then they said, it's coming soon. So actually just a couple of weeks ago, into the fall here, but still maybe in the end of summer area of the calendar, he actually gets up there to have a press conference. And what he says is, I had every intention of giving you a date when you could expect to be open, or a time frame, or a series of dates that are possible, but I don't have any confidence that any of those dates would be met yet, and so I'm not going to give you a date. And I was not at that press conference. I watched chunks of it recorded. From those who were there, though, like, the reporters did the obvious thing to, like, say, like, well, can you give us, like, a order of magnitude? Like, are we talking about days or months?
Another decade?
Or years or decades? And he was, like, not biting, right? And so we are invited to imagine that it might be 200 to 300 years before this opens, or if it ever opens at all, or that it might open next week. However, the only thing he did say is that from now on, every 2 months, he's going to have one of these press conferences to tell us that he can't speculate on the date until the one press conference where he can tell us that he does have a date now. That implies, I think, that it would be at least 2 months that is not opening this year.
But I don't even, maybe because of where I live, it's a little, Toronto's such a big city. Like, you could have something going on Eglinton, and it's, out of sight, out of mind. But why this extraordinary delay? Like, why were they so wrong with the initial timelines?
I mean, I think in fairness to everybody involved, there were construction shutdowns associated with the pandemic that delayed them significantly.
But it was already really delayed before the pandemic.
It was, but not as dramatic.
It was really delayed, not really, really delayed.
And then there's the fact that all these projects everywhere in the world, virtually, not every single one, but it's a pretty routine thing that these projects go way over time and often significantly over budget. This one is not that significantly over budget. And my understanding is actually that part of the problem has been, and I haven't independently confirm this to a degree of certainty, but the whispers I hear, the chat I hear among people who've been close to the project are that Metrolinx is really concerned with not going over budget. And so these companies that have now lost significant amount of money on this project because it's taking so long, because of the increased costs after the shutdown, because of the increased costs due to inflation on construction projects after, recently, right? For any number of reasons. Their profit margin is usually built on change orders, right? Like, you've got the thing and then you say, okay, this is different than what you initially requested. We need extra money for that. And Metrolinx has been fighting them on all of these orders. And so these companies that work for the contractor, some of them massive, potentially face what's been portrayed to me as like bankruptcy level crisis over the amount of money they're going to lose having built the Eglinton Crosstown. Have been trying to get the province to agree, that Metrolinx to agree to pay to finish it. And they've been fighting over that because Metrolinx has an overriding, like, prime directive to not go over budget, right? That there may be much more to it than that, but that's the short version of what's actually happened. But I will say almost all of these kinds of projects go way over time because what happens is that they're approved and scheduled and the budget is set and everything is made before they ever start doing any of the real significant design work. It's like if you've ever had a home renovation project and you don't live in a brand new house and you do your best estimate on what it's going to cost to replace the ceiling in your kitchen.
Right.
And then you take the ceiling down and you say, oh, these joists are all rotted out and there's a family of raccoons living in here.
Right.
And
what's
there's
this
a
knob
hole
and
in the
tube you
wall,
got here?
and I
Right.
got knob and tube wiring.
Right.
We always set our budgets and our timelines before we open the ceiling and see what we're looking at.
Right.
And the nature of that is that there are always going to be some things you did not anticipate that are going to take much longer. But here's the wisdom I learned. One of the few things I worked in the restaurant business. I learned to cook. I learned a lot of stuff. But when I was waiting tables and stuff, what I learned quickly is that when there are delays in the kitchen, when there are backups, when there are mistakes, people, if you go to them and say, you know what, we're really busy, the kitchen lost your order, and it's going to be another half an hour. Or if you say, you don't throw the kitchen under the bus, you say, they're really backed up and we had a giant table, came in right before you, it's going to be another half an hour, or whatever. And then you say something like, I'm really sorry if you have to go back to work. Like if your lunch break is over, I understand your drinks are on the house, right? And lunch tomorrow is on me, right? Or you say, but if you can wait around, I'll buy another round of drinks.
Very good.
And then they leave happy. They
Right.
often, when they know how long it's going to take, they've been given an explanation, an apology, and they've been told what to expect. They often leave happy. Those people will become regular customers. They'll come back. You screwed up their whole lunch. You made them wait an hour, and yet they're still happy because you just clearly communicated to them what they could expect. And this is the one thing we're not getting. Every new revision of the timeline we've been given has turned out to be wildly optimistic.
Right.
And
It's about managing
now we're not even
expectations.
being given a revised timeline. Like we're too close to... You can go to Black Creek Park right now, or Black Creek, there's a park near Black Creek where you can watch baseball games, and in the background of the baseball game, you can see trains running on those tracks on the Eglinton Crosstown every 3 minutes. They are in that phase of testing where they are running frequent service like as if it's rush hour.
Okay.
If it's that close to being finished, surely it's close enough that you could just give us a date.
But they won't.
No.
All right, so that's what the fuck is up with Eglinton Crosstown LRT. That could also be a segment on the Toronto Star podcast. What the fuck is up with Eglinton Crosstown LRT here? Every month, Ed.
It's a long-term strategy. That's going to be a podcast on its own. That's just the WTF Eglinton Crosstown.
Move over billionaire
because
murders.
we probably got years and years and years worth of episodes to come on that.
Right. It's like a One Piece. It's just going to keep going. Okay. That's a reference for Jarvis, who's fallen in love with One Piece here. Okay, so, and then we'll go, like, what's One Piece? Come on, figure it out. Listen, I drop a special episode of Toronto Mic'd at the end of every month in which I like to celebrate and shine a light on people who passed away that month. So I just put together the September 2023 Ridley Funeral Home Memorial episode of Toronto Mic'd. So thank you, Ridley Funeral Home, for supporting the show, pillars of this community. I do have measuring tape. I think I've probably given you
have
more.
This measuring tape. This is a very useful.
You never know. Just check
like
that waistline.
Taylor's measuring tape.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ridley Funeral Home. But this is a long-winded way of saying I was celebrating 2 architects who passed away in September. And I'm wondering, again, I'm putting you on the spot here because you never know what I'm going to bring up here. But, and if you want me to jog your memory on this and that, but Raymond Moriyama and Claude Cormier.
Yeah.
Both sadly passed away in September. And those names, they might not be for the average Joe. And what did I call myself? A normie. For the normies, there might not be name recognition with Raymond Moriyama and Claude Cormier. But once you start reading, like, what in this city, forget other cities like Montreal and New York, all these different places, they all, just in Toronto, these 2 gentlemen, so many public spaces we enjoy on the daily are thanks to their work.
And Moriyama designed quite a lot. Albert Campbell Collegiate Institute in Scarborough, but also the Scarborough Civic Center, which is just last week celebrated its 50th anniversary there, the old City Hall, but also the square around it and all of that right in behind the Scarborough Town Center. But most significantly to a bunch of other places in Toronto. But what most listeners will know most directly are 2 places, right? The Toronto Reference Library at Yonge and Bloor, just north of Yonge and Bloor.
Yep.
Which is my favorite building in Toronto.
Really?
Just for how it looks and feels inside, the purpose it's dedicated to. Like that, we built this cathedral dedicated to like public knowledge, like public access to knowledge, because that's what it is. And when you go in, it was built like almost 50 years ago. Or commissioned almost 50 years ago and designed and then built later in the 1970s, but still 45, 40, whatever.
Right.
It's still, and it still kind of has a fresh contemporary feel all this time later. The other one is the Ontario Science Centre. He built that, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time in there and will have fond memories of it. He built it in the ravine in a way that uses the ravine. Like from inside the building, the ravine is a feature of the building. The swoops and hills and the trees of it. The way you walk through those corridors to get from one place to another. It so naturally inhabits its office. And it has that combination of like a 1960s, 1970s version of Space Age, but still a kind of a cool contemporary feel. So Moriyama, like, just a giant in Toronto City.
Don't forget
building.
the Bata Shoe Museum.
The Bata Shoe Museum, right? Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Which we have since in this city built. There's the addition to the ROM. There is the OCAD building. There's a bunch of what you would consider like of these sort of like architecty buildings that some people look at and go, huh, and other people go, oh, I love that.
Right.
And I feel like there was a milestone when the Bata Shoe Museum was built. It was one of the first of that wave of buildings in Toronto, where you really noticed the architecture, like modern wise. I obviously we have City Hall, like old City Hall and new City Hall. We're both architecturally significant buildings. We have a lot of like kind of Victorian.
What about my
and
friend
Edwardian,
Robards, who I shouted out accidentally earlier in this episode?
Oh boy, yeah. So and then Claude Cormier, who never lived in Toronto. He's a Montreal-based landscape artist, architect, landscape designer. He built parks in Toronto, but also like over the last 20 years in particular, the last 10 to 15 years, really, a lot of public spaces that have gotten the most attention for being like almost un-Toronto-like in their playfulness and in their like. It's so nice. How we're not allowed to have nice things. Who built this? So, that Bursey Park, the fountain with the dogs down near the Flatiron Building,
which is wonderful.
Yeah, Sugar Beach with the pink umbrellas down near the Chorus Building.
Love it. Love it so much.
The HTO with it's also got umbrellas. It's like got a rolling wave
H2O
deck
Park.
and all of that. And then most recently, Love Park, which is where the old off-ramps at York Street and Bay from the Gardiner Expressway used to swoop there, and there was like, they called it a expressway park. Like somebody had wrote me to say, it's not really a new park. There was already a park there under the swooping off-ramps, and it was like, there was some grass you could walk on to navigate a shortcut through beside them, but you were like walking under a highway off-ramp and around it. It's now just a big, massive block of a park with a giant red heart pond in the middle of it with a tree growing on an island in the middle of the... I love that park.
I love it too. My wife works in the building right beside it, and so we've been, we would meet there and have a coffee or whatever. Really nice addition to the city. And again, these are two gentlemen, maybe not the greatest name recognition, but when you look at like what they've brought to the city, like the best stuff, the best parts of the city can be attributed to those two guys.
They got a lot of their fingerprints all over some of the best parts for sure, and some of the best parts of the recent history, right?
Right. Now, Raymond Moriyama passed away at an age I aspired to get there, 93. That is pretty darn awesome. But sadly, we lost Claude Cormier. He was only 63 years old, far too soon. But
absolutely.
Left us some great public spaces we can enjoy.
He also, just as a postscript, this week, so the Toronto Star's office moved down to the Well. at 8 Spadina. And the first thing to open at the Well is the building that includes our office. It was like a big office tower. And I've been working down there forever, and I knew there was still more to come, including residents and stuff, but I don't really know what it was. So they had this big art tour the other day, and I went on it, and they were showing off some of the public art. But because of that, we got to walk through all the different parts of like what's going to open soon. Yeah. And it's like quite an astounding complex down there where they've built like a whole neighborhood of offices and businesses, but also, so on Wellington Street, Cormier Associates, Claude Cormier's firm, was in charge of doing the landscape architecture on Wellington Street. And so they have a bunch of restaurants that are going to open out there and have patios right out onto it. But there's like sort of a stone walk and broad gardens and trees as a like 500 meter long promenade all along Wellington. And I was kind of impressed by the whole well concept, and we'll see once everything opens, like how well
pun intended
they have done.
I'm keen on Keenan
at trying to build a neighborhood block, like a contemporary city. Like there's kind of an indoor mall or outdoor mall element of it, but with like swooping canopies and public art. Nice. And there's all these
love it,
like apartments and condos, like where people will live in and around it. And it's like this one giant square block with so we'll see what it's like in action, but I was encouraged by my preview of it. But also there's essentially a new linear boulevard park by Cormier's firm that's just now becoming visible shortly after his death.
So rest well, gentlemen, and thank you for your contributions to the city of Toronto here. I want to transition us here before we say goodbye. I want to get to Ontario Place and some provincial stuff. And I have a quick story about the CNE before we get there. But I want to shout out Great Lakes Brewery if you want fresh craft beer in the city. Actually, in the province of Ontario. We're going to go beyond Toronto's borders here. In the province of Ontario, Great Lakes is available at LCBOs and grocery stores across this fine province. I pick up my beer at their HQ, as I call it, which is by the Costco here in South Etobicoke. Much love to Great Lakes. There's some fresh craft beer for you to take home with you. Ed, woohoo! And a couple of podcasts I just want to tell the listenership about, because you're subscribed to Toronto Mic'd, obviously. You should also subscribe to the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James. Whether you already work with a trusted financial advisor or currently manage your own investment plans, the Advantaged Investor provides the engaging wealth management information you value as you pursue your most important goals. So, the Advantaged Investor podcast, but there is now season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, the award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. When I was at Ed Keenan's 50th birthday party, one of the guys I met at that party, I saw at Centennial Park yesterday because they had the regional cross-country finals.
Right, and that's a teacher at your kid's
school. At my kid's school. I met in your backyard at your 50th birthday, and I said, Ed's coming over tomorrow, and he was quite excited about it. He seems like a really, a real good dude. But I remember seeing the Moneris speaker. You had a Moneris speaker in the backyard, so you're using that.
Give it to me. You give me that speaker. Do
you need another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've earned it with this appearance.
Yeah.
And again, are you going to listen to season 5 of Yes, We Are Open and be inspired by those great conversations?
Who knows? The things I could do once I have a speaker. I could listen.
This is a mandatory prerequisite. You have to promise me you're going to listen to season 5 of Yes, We Are Open.
I will give it a listen.
There you go. Yeah. You earned that, buddy. You earned that. In fact, okay, so recyclemyelectronics.ca. Everyone listening knows by now that's where you go if you have old electronics, old tech, old devices you want to get rid of. You don't throw it in the garbage. Those chemicals end up in the landfill. That's bad for everybody. Diane Sachs will be very upset with you. If she finds out, she'll be pissed off. You know, her podcast I produce her podcast, Green Economy Heroes, and we're now doing monthly episodes. So we went on hiatus because she had other things to do with the city, but she's making time for one episode a month. So I've been spending some time with Diane lately. But thank you, recyclemyelectronics.ca. I'm going to share the Pumpkins After Dark story because I have a personal story, a very quick one, that'll segue us into the land of Ontario Place. Okay, I worked at the CNE for 3 summers when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm. I worked there for a while in my late teenage and 20s years. I think
now that I'm having flashbacks.
And actually in my early teenage years, So I, me too.
Okay, yeah, you too. So I was 15, 16, 17, those summers. This is like late 80s into the early 90s. Okay. So yeah, you got 1 year on me. I know that because I was at your 50th birthday party. So I'm catching up, Ed. I'm catching up. I know that Ian's on the live stream thinking you've got 21 years on me. It's only 1 year, Ian. It's shocking. I know. Okay. I kid because I like you. So there was the guy I worked for at the CNE. I worked for a little company called Astro Zodiac Enterprises, and they had a bunch of games and stuff at the CNE. And I worked for a man named Ardo Guidaro. This was his name. And I'm telling you, 15, 16, 17-year-old Mike was scared shitless of Ardo. He was a big burly guy. He yelled at us. He had this, I guess because he had a bunch of teens working for him at the X, he had this like persona, sort of like Tony Soprano on a bad day, before we had ever heard of the Sopranos, because it didn't exist yet. I was scared shitless of Ardo Guidaro. Fast forward to, and I wrote about, if you Google Ardo Guidaro, I'm pretty sure you get I wrote about the legend of Ardo Guidaro on TorontoMike.com, and it's one of the hits you'll get if you Google it. So I've been, Ardo, I haven't seen him since I was 17 years old. But last week, my phone rings, and I look at my phone, and this is the true story, Ed. I wouldn't lie to you. The name on the phone, Ardo Guidaro. And I'm telling you, I almost shit my pants. Seeing that, I actually was scared. Like, here I am pushing 50. I was scared.
Oh, no, I'm fucking late for my show.
Maggie's, get back to work. Like, I didn't know what he was going to do, but I was scared shitless.
The float's $50 short, kid.
It was scary. So I answered the phone. Oh, whatever. It turns out, I don't know, the name Ardo Guidaro must be because he's paying the bills on this phone, but it's actually his son, Andrew, is calling me because Andrew's friend, close friend, is a huge Toronto Mike fan and heard me talking about Pumpkins After Dark, which is an award-winning Halloween event taking place in Milton. And I always talk about the promo code because it saves you 15%. So everyone listening who goes to pumpkinsafterdark.com can save 15% with the promo code FOTM10. Is that the correct promo code as I talk about? No, it's not. That's actually not it. It's TOMike15. I'd fix it in post, but I won't. TOMike15 saves you 15% at pumpkinsafterdark.com. But this is actually about something else. They heard me talking about Pumpkins After Dark, and it turns out Ardo Guidaro owns this, like, very different from Pumpkins After Dark because it's to scare the shit out of you, unlike Pumpkins After Dark, which you can actually bring, like, your kids to. It's called Screamers. Have you heard of Screamers?
Yeah, it's like a haunted house kind of thing.
It's like a haunted house thing in the Concord. Anyway, Andrew was talking about that. Anyways, long story short is next week I'm going to talk for the first time since I was 17 years old. I'm on Toronto Mike. I'm going to have a conversation with Ardo Guidaro. And I thought I was a little nervous to talk to Randy Backman. That was nothing. I don't even know what I'm going to do talking to Ardo. It has been a very long time. The legend of Ardo. I got questions for Ardo. Adult Mike needs to talk to Ardo. Why did he put on this persona? Did he know we were all like legit scared shitless of him? And he's running Screamers in Concord, and that's happening next week.
All right. Wow.
So there you go.
What did you do for those games?
Game booth attendant.
Were you like a barker?
Yeah, pretty much like yelling at people to one end to win.
Oh, but you were one of the you didn't have a mic.
Sometimes I had a mic. In fact, quick aside is sometimes we had a mic, and I saw two people wearing 680 CFTR paraphernalia walking by, and I jumped on the mic and I said, 680 CFTR, all hits radio or something, because I actually listened to 680 at the time. And they came over and handed me not only 2 tickets to a Blue Jays game, but there was a pizza party before the game, and I got to attend that as well, just because I shouted them out. So there was a mic sometimes. So I kind of...
So there you go. Hit radio, 6 CFTR. Was it Tom Rivers personally who gave that?
I wish.
Some promos.
But what I know, I guess there were TV ads with Tom. I'm like,
the only reason I asked is that I worked a couple years at like a cotton candy booth, and then I worked for a game for several years, and it was like the birthday game and the Crown and Anchor, these 2 independently owned games right next to each other, and so I loved talking on the microphone because I had loved the idea of being like a radio DJ.
You watch WKRP like me,
and so I would just treat it. You have to do your slogan. Step right up, folks. Try your luck. How's about it? All it takes is $1. $1 will make you holler. Come on in if you want to win, and all of that, right? But it's like I didn't. The rhymes were just like I just wanted to have a talk show out there. I just wanted to and so I thought it was cool, but and I was okay at it. So then the guy the imposing man who owned our game, Alan, would come over and insisted that I be on the mic all the time, right? Get it. I want Ed talking on the mic. And then for 2 or 3 years in a row, he hired me to manage the games, which involved being there every hour that the fair was open. Yeah. So like open to close every day for the entire CNE.
20 days.
And I would talk into the mic that whole time. And of course, so when I started university, like my first day of university, I had this Tom Waits rasp because like I would lose my voice and then I would just fire more and more like
I'm pregnant.
Painkiller stuff into my throat.
Wow.
But later somebody asked me like, how did you, like I used to MC a bunch of events and I did radio work and like people would say like, oh, how did you learn to talk so well into a mic and all of that? And it was like, I think it was like 14 hours a day at the CNE. It seems weird that I was just shouting, come play the birthday game, but it's like you actually learned how to use your voice in a public address system
100%
by doing that for hours and hours and hours, right?
2 comparables. One is Peter Mansbridge at Churchill Airport making the announcements. Right?
Yeah.
And the other one is in Rexdale. I think it was Sears. Oh, that's your phone. Is it breaking news? Is that breaking news?
Probably an editor who wants to...
Okay, because I'm targeting 2 hours or less for you. You don't have to take it good. But it's Strombo who would do the announcements at the Sears or whatever in Rexdale, and that was his, like,
there you
broadcasting
go.
debut. Okay, by the way, this is important. That PDF that I would read in the early 2006, 2000, I think it was 2007, to be honest. It was called Star PM.
That's right.
Right.
I don't.
And I only know that because I went to TorontoMike.com.
I wasn't even working at the Star at the time, but I do remember when that came out, and it was like there used to be an afternoon edition of the Star, like the print edition.
Right.
There used to be multiple editions every day of all these newspapers, right? But then also like in special when breaking news happened, and the last time I think it happened at the Star was actually 9/11, September 11th, 2001, but. Certainly during the Rob Ford crisis, the Sun did it one day. You would publish like what's called a Bulldog edition, which was like an update that comes out and you sell it to people commuting home on the TTC. This is when, back so long ago when you couldn't get a cell phone signal on the TTC. Remember that on the subway when you couldn't use your data on the subway?
Hard to believe.
Lo, those many hours ago. So anyhow, like... That PM Toronto was like a digital age version of that Bulldog
PM Toronto was where you'd bet on the horses.
Oh no,
they had
what
one in
did you say
Galleria
it was
Mall.
called? The Star PM?
Star PM.
All right.
You just remind me of Galleria Mall. So
obviously ingenious enough branding that I cannot remember
you were
the name,
close. You said
but
Star
I do
Tonight
remember
or something.
PM Toronto's at Galleria Mall.
Yeah, well, I worked at Galleria Mall for 5 years. I know PM Toronto very well. Okay.
Oh my God,
so,
we have so much.
we?
My dad worked at Galleria Mall for years and years.
Where? Because
he worked at the Towers.
That was.
I was in the Towers fashion shows at Galleria Mall.
Okay.
There was a Walter Rubino.
Wait a minute, I gotta slow your roll here. Hold on, let me just process this. So in the middle of the mall, where the Amigos, whatever, they sold me the coffees or whatever. That mall, they'd have fashion shows. Because one of the anchors were, if I remember correctly, in the area you're talking about, Food City, where I worked. Food City was one anchor. There might have been a Boots. It eventually became like a Pharma Plus or something, but it was a Boots before it got bought out or whatever. And then, Towers, which would eventually become a Zellers or something like that.
HBC bought it and turned it into Zellers, and then.
So your dad worked at the Towers, and you were like a model for this.
Well, I mean, it was like all the models in the fashion show were like family members of the staff of the.
I miss the Galleria Mall.
Right?
I just want to shout out the Galleria.
Was Walter Rubino the manager of Or you might not have been kind of employee who knows the manager.
No,
of the mall.
I would sometimes have to go to the management because I would be sent from the manager at Food City to whatever, but I didn't know the name of those.
When my dad worked there, the manager was a guy named Walter Rubino, and I didn't know him then. When I met him, he was one of my high school teachers, and my dad said, like, Rubino? What? That can't be the same guy. And it's like, oh, no, yeah, that's him.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's why you do what you do. Okay.
And Walter Rubino, just to close it, ran for mayor in the most recent election. He was one of the fringe candidates.
One of the 102 candidates in that election. That is wild. Like, I'm going to drop this fun fact on the reg. That's amazing. Okay, so I brought up my CNE story about Ardo Gadaro, not just because I'm going to talk to Ardo next week on Toronto Mike, which is a mind blow for me, but because it gets us, we're at CNE, so now we're crossing the over to Ontario Place. I'll shut up for a while. People are tired of my voice. Where are we at with Ontario Place? Because the more I learn about this, the stinkier it gets. I think this is as greasy as the Greenbelt scandal. Please talk to me, Ed Keenan from the Toronto Star, about the private spa that's...
well, where we're at with Ontario Place is like full steam ahead,
yeah,
right?
The bell is gone.
The request for proposals to chop down all the trees has gone out. It says right in it that like time is of the essence on this project. They're expected to get the work done quickly. And so, that's going to happen soon. And I think people are expecting that at any point they're going to erect fences. And step one to try and make this irreversible will be raise the forest, right? Like once you've eliminated the landscape that's there, then you got to rebuild it no matter what. And so, hey, might as well be a big spa and water park, right?
Yes.
I think Olivia Chow's suggestion of the Better Living Center, which is kind of run down and often abandoned outside of the exhibition and some special exhibits.
Right.
The Exhibition Place board would love to have that year-round attraction there. I think that it's closer to the Ontario Line subway station that they're building.
Yes.
Eventually. The CNE grounds for most of the year is essentially an epic parking lot, so you don't need a new underground parking garage. It's like, this is just like win-win-win to me. And actually, like, I am not opposed to the concept of this type of spa in Toronto. Like, I think
none of us are.
Woodbine,
we just don't want
out near Woodbine, this would be like a major attraction, right? There's a racetrack and a casino there now, and you put this water park spa, the tourists will go there, the locals will go there. It's like magnet, it will be great.
Right.
It's like, don't fuck up Ontario Place. We only got one park on the waterfront there. And when we give it away, it's gone for good. But this logic has not, it doesn't apply. On some level, Doug Ford and his government, and the key members of his government, like, don't believe, like, Parkland is real. Or they don't, like, I like things like Ferris wheels. I like bar complexes. I like all of that stuff. It's just like, I also like public space on the waterfront, and I like put something there that will enhance it rather than replace it, right? Put an attractions there, whether it's even like a roller coaster like they used to have, put like, I could see on the site of the old water park at Ontario Place, which is now a vast expanse of concrete where they have 3-on-3 basketball tournaments and stuff. Put a big Ferris wheel there. Put a like, those kinds of attractions have a place. It's just like, you've got this one whole island that stretches out into the lake with a beach on one side of it that used to be kind of an educational theme park and is now a sort of a landscaped, contoured forest with all kinds of like walkways going through it. And it's like, that's where we need a giant glass dome that we'll charge admission to. That's like the one spot.
A private spa.
Yeah. I mean, so as far as I can tell, the outcry has been the outcry. People continue to hold protests, continue to sign petitions, continue to make alternative suggestions like the Better Living Center, including the mayor. I think they're running out of time and runway to make it happen. The province is participating in the city planning process voluntarily. There's no requirement that the province in developing provincial land has to abide by the city's planning process. They are doing it as a courtesy to the city for whatever public relations value it gives them. But they've got a deadline of like the end of this year to complete that process and just get begun. And in the meantime, they're already hiring the folks who are going to raise the forest that's there. Therm, the company that's going to build this spa, is like, full steam ahead. We bid on this project for this one particular location. We're not at all interested in discussing Exhibition Place or Woodbine or any other locations. Like, so, I mean, if people out there like want to call their member of provincial parliament, want to arrange to be a part of a protest, want to take whatever political action they think they can take to have their voice heard, now's the time to do it. If you want to say on this, it's looking less and less likely that that he's going to back down on this. He did back down on the green belt. He did back down on other stuff.
There was a green belt reversal, big news, of course, although that leads to a bunch of different questions. But so if the public outcry is greater than X, or does it matter where the outcry is coming? Because with the green belt, I noticed it was the province was out, but Ontario Place, it seems to just be Toronto, and I don't think Doug Ford cares about.
I think he wants to be liked in Toronto. I think he wants to be seen as a great man in Toronto. He wanted to be mayor of Toronto, right? His brother was mayor of Toronto. He wants to be Mr. Toronto, but he also ultimately changes his mind and cares when he sees something really hurting him in the polls. Like, he wants to be popular, and so I think on the Greenbelt, ultimately, when he could see that even conservative voters were abandoning him over it, right? And thought, this stinks. It stinks in a way that we're not going to forgive. When he saw that, he changed his mind. I don't know at this point if Ontario Place has a wide enough resonance. Like, there is a perception that the outcry about Ontario Place comes from a bunch of downtown elitist pinko newspaper columnists and city councilors and stuff who never shut up about like public space issues and bike lanes and all of that stuff, right? He doesn't care about those people. So, I mean, if there's public polling showing that he's going to lose significant amount of votes over it, that might move the needle. But
I call you Edward and I'm being very serious.
Yeah.
But the very few seats in the city of Toronto went to the Progressive Conservative. You're sitting in one right now, but they're very few.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few, though.
There were a few. Well, when we talk about the Conservative Party of Canada, we talk about 0 seats in Toronto, right? But when we talk about the Progressive Conservative Party provincially, there are a few.
Yeah. No, exactly.
So I don't see how it could damage him in the next election, which seems to be what it takes to get reason out of him. But I am curious, you as a Toronto Star employee, like we have good journalists at the Toronto Star pulling at the threads here, only because it does smell to me. I feel like there's more to this story, because if you step back and go back up 100 feet and look down and, it's that Ontario Place, which they just let run down. Hey, they're going to come in, swoop it in, put in a private spa and all those parking spots. And there's going to be how many dollars of public money are going to be spent for this private spa. We got to pull at these threads, man. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark.
I think people are going to continue to pull at those threads. But I think on a lot of these projects, and this is my default assumption, which could be overturned by evidence, right? But a lot of things where people look at Doug Ford and they would say, is he getting some kind of payoff? Like, I think more often the Occam's razor here that applies is that Doug Ford likes these business people and he likes to impress them and he likes to show them that he's a big shot and give them contracts because he actually thinks that's how you do business, right? Like, he thinks that's a good Ontario, open for business. That means I'm going to give good stuff to business people, right? Developers,
right.
Whatever. And when he goes and sees these big spas or attractions and stuff, he's like, that's the character of a city. Because when you're a tourist and you go to a city and you're like, oh, let me ride the Ferris wheel on the waterfront. Let me go to the Wild Water Kingdom. Let me go to the Great Wolf Lodge. Let me eat at the giant restaurant overhanging the falls or whatever, right? You're like, those are the defining elements in that place. Now, if you talk to the people there, very seldom are the tourist attractions the defining elements of those places, right? Like, what New Yorker goes up. How often do they go up the Empire State Building? How
Right.
often do you and I go up the CN Tower? I'm glad
Right.
the CN Tower is there. John Sewell is still
When someone
ranting and
visits
raving
us,
about it,
yeah,
but it's like, but it's like you
out-of-towners.
don't think that's the stuff that makes great neighborhoods. That's the big asset that makes it worth living in Toronto. It's like those are cool side shows.
Right. Okay, I'm not, not just because I spend 3 years. I happen to love.
Do you have any
Ontario
more
Place.
promos to do?
Do you need a washing
I just
break?
need a second. Yeah.
Go. We'll wrap up when you come back. I will share some radio news. So Mr. Keenan will be right back with us. But I'm sharing a couple of pieces of radio news, and then I'll get Ed's feedback on this when he comes back. One of which, a story I broke on TorontoMike.com, is that FOTM Josie Dye is a morning show host at Indy 88. There's a whole separate story here where Indy 88 has been sold to another smaller outfit. But irregardless, that's not a word, by the way. Regardless, Josie Dye has quit her job as morning show at Indy 88. I don't know how long she'll stick around, but she's still there. But she's given her notice. They're actively looking for her replacement there. And she has taken a job with 104.5. We used to know it as Chum FM. They dropped the FM from the branding, but at Chum. And we wish Josie well. I mean, this is a big deal for her. I think there will be, Bell Media has some television component to this. And, I know a lot of people listening to me right now are big Josie Dye fans. So she'll be doing the afternoon drive at the new station, 104.5. She's taken the Meredith Shaw spot that was vacated when Meredith Shaw left Chum for breakfast television. So, Ed, welcome back. I was just updating everybody.
I wonder if people out there are listening and they're thinking, Indy 88 needs a new morning person.
Ed
That's
Keenan.
Toronto Mike. Oh, wait. Toronto
You know what?
Mike.
If anything ever goes south with you in the Toronto Star, and it would never be because of your work, you're the best, and they're lucky to have you, but tough times in media. Your show on the TMDS podcast network is going to be called Keen on Keenan, okay? And we talked about Pagan
Right.
quite a bit earlier, but I told Pagan when he's on the outs at TVO, and what time is it? It could be any minute now, okay? I love that guy, but this is the nature of the business. I believe his show will be called What's Shaken But the Pagan.
Oh, I thought you were going to
TMDS,
say "pain the ass," but
Well,
it doesn't.
I like mine better.
Pain seemed like a near rhyme in my head before I said it out loud.
Shake it by the bacon. One last radio note that you can tell me what you think of it. I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but Metro Morning is a very popular.
Speaking
show.
of recently filled morning announcer jobs.
Right, and look, you should be my co-host. You set me up perfectly there. They've named a new. So Aisha Alpha comes. Ismail. I said the wrong name. That's his sister's name. Okay, that's funny how that's in my head like that because she's very funny.
Are you
Aisha
friends with
Alpha.
the family?
I know the sister from booking her on Humble and Fred. She's a very funny comedian. So I wouldn't say I'm friends, but they're from Winnipeg. Are they from Winnipeg? Just like my friend Randy Backman.
Maybe CBC should go with a comedian as they have somebody
their guy.
distinguished instead. Yeah.
David Common, who I always think is, when I hear him filling in, I think David Common is very good at this. David Common is the new morning show host on CBC Radio 1 here in Toronto. He's the Metro Morning host, and he has confirmed he is making his Toronto Mike debut later this year.
He has that kind of like, I was reading the story about him being announced, and from what I've heard of him, which is relatively limited, like I've seen him on the air on TV over the years a little bit and heard him occasionally on the radio, but he seems very good. But he's one of these guys where like he has reported from 85 countries, and it's like, I didn't even know there were 85 countries. Like I was a foreign correspondent for a couple of years in the U.S., but it's like
you reported from 2 different countries.
That's right. 2 different countries I have reported from. But no. So like, obviously, kind of cool career and a kind of cool next step.
He's good at it.
So
he's good at it, and I always like the cut of his jib. So he's good. That's a new more. And before, when you were taking care of business, shout out to my friend Randy Backman. What the hell am I doing? I was just revealing the big news that Josie Dye is leaving Indy 88 for Chum. She's going to take over where Meredith Shaw was, because Meredith Shaw took a job on breakfast television, and that's how it all works.
Oh, and
here.
then Meredith Shaw is over at
She went to Rogers, so to work with closely with John Tory. Just kidding. There you go. All right, we're winding down now because I will not let an Ed Keenan episode exceed 2 hours. As you can see, his bladder can't make it 2 hours. So do you have any thoughts? So Jennifer Hollitt's on over tomorrow. She's with the Walrus. Toro versus the Walrus 20 years on. What are your thoughts?
Are they competitors?
I don't know. This was a Wise Blot plant. Literally, I copied and pasted it.
I mean, I'm trying to remember if they were founded at the same time. I think Toro came first, and then it was kind of like winding things up around the time the Walrus came out. Maybe not. I don't know. Okay. I mean, one of them is still publishing.
Right.
One of them is not.
Right. I think
Toro,
the first cover. Go ahead.
If anybody is too young to remember it or was not plugged into media stuff, Toro was a men's magazine, a sort of a modeled to be a Canadian version of Esquire, with like some good long form writing, like fashion stuff, a little bit of cheesecake now and again, and you know. For those of us in the journalism business, the big scoop on Toro and the Walrus, the reason why they might be together in some people's minds if they were in the writing game is because $2 a word speaks a language every freelance journalist understands. And the standard in Canada for freelance magazine journalism in the early 1970s was $1 a word. And the standard in Canada in the year 2005, say, was $1 a word. No raises for inflation, no raises of any kind. And so these two magazines that were rumored or reported to have been paying as much as $2 a word, there's an asterisk there, like for some high-profile contributors on some pieces and all of that, meant there was tremendous excitement among journalists for them. Toro, was revived at some point as more of a straight ahead, like fashion magazine marketing ploy. That also didn't work. I take it. The Walrus is still going now as a educational nonprofit, but still a published magazine. So I don't have a lot of as a reader. When they were both in print at the same time, I found Toro to be a livelier read. The Walrus has certainly won way more national magazine awards and has maybe done some much more serious, longer form journalism. But there you go.
I believe that the first cover person for Toro magazine was Sam Roberts, the rock star, and I confirmed this week that Sam Roberts will be in person in the Toronto Mike studios here for a sit down.
Wow, how about that? You can ask him about Toro versus the Walrus.
That's gonna be my first question. Like, just get comfortable, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rogers. All right, we're winding down now.
Sam Rogers band.
Yeah, the Sam Rogers band. Kind of a heavy topic to close with, but I enjoyed your piece on this, and I was hoping we could just chat a little bit about these protests that occurred recently, anti-gender ideology protests.
There's a new one coming up, too. Somebody emailed me today to say, did you see on YouTube? I had not seen on YouTube. Did you see on YouTube one of these guys has announced that they're going to do another one in October?
But sometimes wasn't there something recently that never actually materialized, like some kind of a little convoy?
Yeah, it was like there's this convoy blockade of Queen's Park. And I play hockey with a guy who works in finance at Queen's Park, like as a civil servant, a bureaucrat. But he's like, the whole roads were shut down. The police presence in the buildings was heavy. Like, they were really concerned.
Nobody came.
And nobody came. So
just like your 50th birthday,
there are
when it was
these
just you and I
protests,
at the party. But
I did go down to. They called it the Million Canadians March, right, or something like that.
Something like that.
There was an implication there that it was going to be 1 million people. I think they're talking about across the country because it was coordinated protests in various cities. I can report to you that at Queen's Park in Toronto, the number was less like 7 digits and more like high 3s, low 4s. Like maybe, I'm not an expert at crowd size estimates, but I would have probably said like maybe 1,000, 1,500 people. There was an equally large crowd or potentially larger of counter protesters who were like, trans rights are human rights, and the other people were like, hands off our kids. And it was the whole fuck Trudeau crowd, right? Like one of the most common posters there was that fuck Trudeau poster with a Canadian flag on it. There was a bunch of like shouting and talking about Trudeau being a pedophile and part of the, and how there was a lot of like anti-vaxxers there, like with anti-vax signs and like literature and shirts that were like anti-mask as well, and how people there will tell you and hand you literature that would outline how those vaccines and 15-minute cities and also credit cards are part of a global conspiracy that Trudeau is no doubt a part of to like control your life and monitor you and implement a system where if you don't do like things like change your gender and stuff that you'll be punished. It's like we are talking about the worst like wackaloons in the country. This is their outrage of the moment, and they are joined by some earnest and I believe misguided actual parents who are concerned about the educational curriculum as regards trans people in the school system. In the United States, this trans issues have really been raised up as this like kind of hateful wedge, right? And so in Kentucky and Tennessee and all these other states, they've implemented laws where like trans people can't use the appropriate washrooms for themselves, or they can't play on the sports team that corresponds to their gender, even if their teammates and opponents want them to. And they can't, nobody's obligated to use their preferred pronouns, which is like really the least of anybody's concern, right? Like it's like, I mean, just the number of people who encounter a situation where anybody pointing out that they're being impolite is like, how dare you infringe on my rights? I don't have to call you sir. I can call you shithead if I want to call you shithead. Hey, shithead, why are you so upset at me for calling you shithead all the time? It's like, no, nobody's trying to infringe on your rights. You're free to be an asshole. We'll just call you an asshole when you are, right? And that's why a lot of these people like, oh no, they're the worst kind of snowflakes who are like, you know, he wants to be called he instead of she, and somehow that is an offense against me, like enough that I need to start a public campaign to get sympathy about it, right? In the meantime, it's just like somebody did ask you to use a title to refer to them. That's like, it's optional it's too.
Like,
like they don't
Mike,
have to
don't
be their
call me
friend.
Michael. It's
yeah. Like and so and you know, I had a long email exchange with somebody who was not at the protest, and he said, I have a few specific concerns. Like I was initially against gay marriage way back when gay marriage was the topic du jour, but I came around on it, and I actually had an evolution that I believe has like opened my eyes to a whole different way of looking at the world. And so I don't want you to think I am some ideological bigot, right? I actually want trans people to have long, healthy lives and be supported in their decisions and all of that. But I am concerned about some of the ways that the current TDSB policy counsels teachers to counsel students and whether or not their parents should be included in those discussions, what they're allowed to say to people. He's not talking about the curriculum. He's talking about guidelines for interpersonal private counseling, right? And I think even his concerns, from what I'm able to get from experts on this, are maybe overblown. He's worried about situations that we haven't seen arising. But still, I can understand his concerns. Right? The expressed concerns about the curriculum are just like gibberish. They're just nonsense. Like there's nobody out there trying to convert your kids, right? Like there's nobody preaching like all they're preaching is acknowledging that certain people exist and that they should be tolerated and welcomed as members of the community, acknowledged as they are. Right. That's it. And it bugs me a little bit that these guys focus on like, oh, these perverts. The only reason they want to talk about sex with your kids is because they're perverts. They're perverts that are like trying to like, I don't know. I guess the plan is that you get them to change their gender identity and then you do your perverted stuff. I don't know. I don't know why that would be a prerequisite, because like the history of actual perverts is rich with people who fulfilled their traditional gender roles just fine, just like fully and completely. But I know several trans people, and my understanding of their identity has nothing to do with sexuality. It has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with how you feel being acknowledged, like whether, like how you dress, how you present yourself, like whether you see yourself as a man or a woman. It's not a kinky sex thing at all. Like it's not related. I mean, obviously there are some, in the same way that me being male is somehow related to my sexuality eventually, right? Like, but it's not like when we talk about trans issues and all of that stuff, we're really not talking about people's sex lives. We're talking about how they see themselves existing in the world, like when they're fully dressed, when they're out at work, when they're interacting with people. And the people who want to turn everything into some weird kinky sex thing, to me, that's the perversion, right? And so I'm not real impressed with these protests is the upshot of it. But I also, it encouragingly to me, it does seem to be a bit of a fringe minority at this point, not some general, broad-based, widespread panic about this issue among the general public.
I hope you're right.
Sorry to rant.
No. I was hoping you would do one of those. I'm keen on the Keenan rants, but it seems to me like I almost want to say in certain groups that it's become kind of trendy and hot to be anti-trans, and I can't wrap my head around it. And I've noticed it, it'll pop up in a Dave Chappelle bit or whatever, and it pops up here, and then these protests, and it's all. I was hoping you could help me understand, like, why is there this anti-trans? We would no longer tolerate misogyny or, homophobia or racism, and I struggle to understand why in some sects, SECTS, anti-trans sentiments seem to be so in vogue in 2023. It's concerning to me and disappointing to me, and
well, I think there's like a political movement, right, that has its own motives, right? And those motives are like whipping up outrage in the service of like a semi-authoritarian ideology wherever they can whip up outrage, right? It was like critical race theory last year in the United States. It's trans stuff this year. It's like wherever they think they can prey on the concerns of parents or others, like that there's an actual legitimate safety issue or their kids are being brainwashed or whatever. But I do think that among like comedians and hipsters and whatnot, there's a knee-jerk impulse that I actually understand because I have an instinct to share it sometimes, to push back against boundaries being imposed on you. And it was just what I was saying. Like, comedians always want to invoke the right to be an asshole, right? Because sometimes it's funny to be an asshole. Sometimes the jokes are funny. So they don't want to be told that they can't tell rape jokes. They don't want to be told that they can't tell Holocaust jokes. They don't want to be told that they can't make fun of a woman who looks to them like a man, right? And so that they want that all to be fair game. And I understand that the comedians thing is like, if you say these things are unthinkable, unsayable, then they ultimately become unthinkable. Like if you can't articulate what you find weird or uncomfortable or dangerous. Like, you can't think through the process. Like, you have to be able to joke about these things. And not only that, they'll say, you can't tell those jokes unless they're funny, right? If you're making people laugh, you're touching something on them. Obviously, you haven't ventured out of air, right? It's like, that's a whole separate debate about humor. But I think, like, in a lot of these politically correctness conversations and all of that, which we've called different things over the years, I have sometimes been guilty of this, but I think we have a tendency, our discomfort with having socially imposed limits on us gets confused with, like, the government imposing speech limits on us, right? And so the argument, I want it to be socially acceptable for me to openly express homophobia, is different than the argument, I want to be able to be homophobic without being thrown in jail for it, right?
Right.
I think where I stand on those two different arguments is two different places,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, agreed.
Like, you are free to be a jerk, but everybody else is free to call you a jerk, right? That's actually free speech. We're having an exchange of views, right? And I think the comedians hopping on it, though, are like, there's always a place for, if you say the taboo thing, you say the thing you're not supposed to say, there's a certain cool factor to that in a lot of people's minds and in a lot of comedians' minds. And I think that's where we're at with trans issues, is that people have determined, oh, this is the new third rail that you're not supposed to touch. Let me jump on it.
Well said, as usual, Ed Keenan. Always a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. I'll see you again in a quarter.
Yeah, it will pop up as a reminder in my calendar. We don't even communicate before these. Like,
No.
Mike sent me a message today or last night saying, "Are you still coming tomorrow?" And it's just like, oh yeah, it's in my calendar.
And here you are. And you did earn that lasagna, so don't leave here without it. And that brings us to the end of our 1,338th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Ed is at The Keenan Wire. And much love to those who make all of this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. That's Palma Pasta. That's Raymond James Canada. That's Moneris. That's Recycle My Electronics. That's Pumpkins After Dark. Get your tickets now. TO Mike 15 is the promo code. And that's Ridley Funeral Home. We dropped a new episode of Life's Undertaking last night. That's Brad Jones's excellent podcast I get to co-host. See you all tomorrow when my special guest is Jennifer Hollett.